Turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn. We got the seas are rising, but the struggle's long. We're gonna turn history, turn it around, and the CEO's got money.
Okay. So as my old friend and attorney, a man who helped keep me out of prison, actually, for my most recent plowshare action, would say, don't say anything in an email that you would not want the FBI to read. And probably the same is true for Zoom. And so if the FBI is tuning in, hi there, what the Portland Peace Team does is we try to keep everybody safe, and we try to help campaigns and movements with their strategy. That's sort of our main goal. And so I'm just going to very quickly run through a couple of things before we hand it off and start going through our actual method. This is Mina Matthews, by the way, for those who have ever seen the classic nonviolent de-escalation film, The Interrupters. She works for Ceasefire in Chicago, right in the middle of gangland, and they specialize in intervening in and heading off violence in that town. And as folks know, that town has kind of got a reputation as violent, and she is kind of their golden girl, really an amazing figure in the sort of world of de-escalation. And what we say, what we try to impart, if it doesn't work for you or if it seems wrong in any way, just discard it. There are many methods of teaching and practicing this skill, and we're just offering what we do. So one of the things that we try to do is be prepared, especially if we're in the role of peacekeeper. On our peace team, we try to follow the guidance of emergency workers. Keep your antenna up, keep your head on a swivel. So we oftentimes are looking places where nobody else is looking, and we're not looking where everybody else is looking. If people are trained on the speaker, we're kind of glancing all over the place. Patrick and I were just out when our state's Attorney General, Ellen Rosenblum, was delivering a speech right out in the clear, in the open at Terry Shrunk Plaza. And she had just been on, Rachel Maddow with a very strong interview. So we were very concerned. We were watching rooftops and everything else. I mean, we're in a different time now that we sort of never used to be in. So what we don't want when we go out, we don't want to engage in a power struggle or a debate. We don't want to escalate ourselves or not handle anybody else who's escalating. And obviously, we don't want violence. What we do want is we want to defuse problems that seem to be arising. We want to emotionally and basically disarm anybody who is escalating. We want to attend to everybody's safety. When we go out, we are clear that we want the safety of the alt-right, Antifa, the participants in the event, the police, and ourselves. And with regard to ourselves, we kind of try to follow the dictum of the lifeguard. Don't make more victims. If you're not really remotely confident that you can handle something, stay back until you can feel that confidence, because we really don't want two people drowning instead of one. And so we try to do it in a way that reflects not just our training, but how we're doing and who we are partnered with for the day. We want everybody at the end of the day to feel okay about the outcome. And the final slide I'm going to show, which is our main method, and others will go through the elements of this, is the Clara method. The photo that you see on the right, I'm sorry this didn't come through, but the woman you see the side of her face, that's Antoine Tuff. I don't know if folks remember her, but she's the woman who was at the front desk when this young man on the right came into their school, in public school in Georgia, fully strapped and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, and told her, "I'm here to kill everybody." And she de-escalated him. He insisted that she call 911 to tell 911 to tell the media that he was going to do this. He was intent on sort of being some kind of media star by slaughtering a bunch of people. And she kept him on that 911 call, which was recorded for posterity. It has been part of a documentary film about her. She talked him off the ledge. She talked him down and basically got him to submit and surrender himself. So it looked like, okay, here comes another mass shooting. And she completely flipped that script. So that is, that's what we're trying to do, kind of every time that we go out. So I guess my final point is we have a set of protocols, and let's see if I can get those protocols. Oh yeah, there we go. That we ask that any campaign that or event or organization or coalition, anybody who asks us to come out, that they have a nonviolent code of conduct. And we don't go out unless we're invited. That they announce from their megaphone or microphone, number one, that code of conduct, but number two, that they have invited the Portland Peace Team there to help remind everybody about that code of conduct. We make it clear to the organizers, and we've actually had to back out of at least one event because they were under the impression that evidently they had created themselves that we were police agents, that we were going to be, quote, the eyes and ears of the police. We are not. We are neither agents of the police, although we're happy to liaise with them, and we have a very good relationship in Portland with the Portland police, but they know we're not there to inform them if somebody's breaking the law. We're not there on their behalf. In fact, we ask them, if at all possible, stay away. We do better when you don't show up. Thank you very much. And that our final protocol is that we don't work with other groups who are armed security. We can't help it. If the police do show up, they're going to be armed, and that's the way that it is. But the unofficial armed people are not the ones that we're going to work with. All of our protocols are a result at one point or another of basically lessons learned. And I'm going to hand off this and the idea of the basic method that we use to Adam, but I just want to mention about the Clara method as I'm handing it off, that it is the gold standard. I was just on a pretty big Shanti Sena Zoom call. Actually, Rosie was on that too. And Mary Hanna of the Meta Peace Team, they're kind of like the mothership of peace teams in the United States and Canada. And she said, spontaneously, she said, I don't know what we would do if we didn't have the Clara method. So it's been used all over the world by unarmed civilian protectors. So it's the method that we use. And with that, I am now going to pass it over to Adam, please, and Soraya.
Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here tonight. I don't see Soraya. Oh, there you are, Soraya. Wonderful. So tonight we're going to be talking about the reason that you need the CLARE method, at least for the C, which stands for calm and center. Our natural response when we're in situations where people are escalating is to go into a state of fight, flight, freeze, abject surrender. Is everybody familiar with that? Okay, so our body has a natural response to keep us safe. And when we're in situations where we're going to inject ourselves into other people's issues, these are people that typically we may not know. They're also people that, you know, might have ill intent towards one another and towards us going into it. And our body has a natural response to that. And that's to fight, flight, freeze. Does everybody know what their body's natural response is? Does anybody not know? How about that? Okay, so if you know what your responses are, then you know that your body is going to respond in a certain way, right? When you're feeling anxious, you're feeling scared or uptight or whatever you're feeling in that moment when you're watching an escalating situation, your body is going to show you and tell you. And we need to understand what those signals are so that we can overcome them and bring peace to ourselves. If we don't bring peace to ourselves, we definitely can't bring peace to the situation we're trying to help, right? Okay, so what are some of the ways that our body responds when we're feeling that way? And we'll just raise hands and I'll call on somebody. What does our body do? Our shoulders might go up. Okay, Margaret.
I get really hyper aware, I guess, of like sounds, lights, words that people are using.
Okay, hyper awareness. Okay, what are some other things that our body might do? Our face might become flushed. What are some other things? Our muscles tense up. Meg?
No, I can feel my heart start pounding.
Our heart speeds up. It's and our breaths get shallower and our body's trying to get more oxygen into our muscles so that we can run or we can fight or whatever it is that we need to do. Excellent. What else? What else does our body do? Okay, we might back up. We might back away from the situation and recognizing in ourselves, oh wait, something's ahead of us. We might back up. Any other ideas? Our face might become flushed, right? And so when we recognize these things happening and we see that we see in our bodies and we feel in our bodies that this is happening, we have to have a way to counteract that. We have to have a way to say, even in the midst of something that's worrying me or something that's scary or something that's making me feel anxious, even in the midst of that, I can still have control of myself in how I respond. Because the fight, flight, freeze, abject surrender, those are all reactions. And what we want to not do when we're in the peacekeeping setting is react. We want to be able to respond and to respond thoughtfully as we're doing that, right? So we have to have ways to calm and center ourselves. And I know, having been an FOR member for a long time, a lot of us have ways to calm and center ourselves because I've had discussions with some of you about that. What are some of the ways that you calm and center yourselves when you're in situations where you're feeling maybe anxious or you see something going on that worries you? What do you do? Not everybody at once.
I might picture people as they are, as if they are children, beloved children.
Nice, Rosie. I like that a lot. That's wonderful. What are some other things we can do to calm ourselves?
Breathe.
Breathe.
Deep breath.
Taking a deep breath, that calms the vagal nerve. And when you take that deep breath, you're saying, I'm okay. Because you're not breathing really shallow. You're overcoming your body's natural response by taking that deep breath. That's a great one. What are some other ways?
Notice how it feels in the body and welcome it rather than fighting it.
Oh,
Welcome the feeling, not the thoughts, just the feeling.
Focus on the feeling and reframing it. That's great. What are some other ways? What about some tactile ways? Maybe planting your feet into the earth and knowing that you're planted there and you're a part of something bigger. That's a good one that I've heard before. Any other ideas?
Humming.
Humming. Okay, nice. What are some other ways we calm and center ourselves? The thing is, not everybody thinks about this. Not everybody thinks, oh, in the moment when I'm anxious, I've got to calm and center myself so that I can bring peace to this situation. And we need to be reframing ourselves to that way. Sue, did you have something? Sue Ann?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say, I sometimes imagine the energy, the feelings I'm having sort of draining out of my body into a puddle at my feet and then stepping out of it. Kind of a visual.
Oh, that is a great visual. I love that. Thank you.
Maybe connecting with someone that you have brought along as part of an affinity group.
Okay. Making a connection, maybe meeting eyes with someone that you know calms your heart. That's great. Or maybe even a physical holding hands. I can see that. Thank you, Art. Okay, so the thing about it is we can't in the moment practice what needs to happen for us to be prepared in that moment. So what we need to be doing is practicing beforehand. We need to be practicing between now and November 3rd, when this election happens and things might go off the rails. We need to be practicing now how to calm and center ourselves. What are some ways that we can do that? I have one that I know really works well, and it's something you can do between now and then that if you do it on a daily basis, will help you be calm in that moment. And that is meditation. Doing a visual meditation while watching something scary. So if you have a television and you watch TV or you ride the bus or you see things happening around you in your daily lives, or somebody's yelling on the corner or something's happening, it's right in that moment that you have to be practicing this stuff. And you have to be thinking, oh, what is my body doing in response to this, to whatever's happening in front of me? Oh, I'm noticing that I'm anxious, or, oh, I'm noticing that something scary is on TV and I'm feeling my shoulders come up and I feel myself starting to get small, or I feel myself starting to get big and I want to fight. Whatever it is, you need to recognize that and be practicing it every day, right? Does everybody have things happen to them on a daily basis that makes them anxious, and you don't have to share this, but that makes you anxious or makes you feel like things aren't necessarily in your control or worried or whatever? Typically something happens every day. And if not, we need to invite that into our world as peacekeepers. We need to invite that so that we can practice recognizing our body's response and also practice our way of overcoming that. Okay. Patty, did you have a question?
No, I wanted to respond, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
I put together a workshop for Witness for Peace a while ago for people that were going down to Central America to be witnesses for the mothers of the disappeared. And so they were going into a very dangerous situation, and it was a very scary situation because people were being killed in situations. And so to run that workshop, one of the things we did was actually break into pairs and take turns talking about our fears about dying. And it was really effective because the thing was, the big fear, for example, when we might be running into people with guns in the next few months and become very, very scared. And the fact that in a pair that each person would spend some time, you know, say 15 minutes talking about their feelings and then switch and let the other person was very effective, both for the people who went, who said that gave them some strength.
That's amazing, Patty. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great idea. And you know, it's something you can do over Zoom. It's something you can do with your partner. You can do this, Patty's idea, with anyone. I think that's wonderful. Thank you. Any other ideas around that people would like to share? This is very, very truncated version of the training, and you're going to have more training, I understand, on the 27th. So our portion's actually coming to a close here for the C. And if you have any questions about the C or you want to talk more about this, I'm happy. I'll leave my email and I'm happy to discuss that. Soraya, did you have anything you wanted to add before we move on to the L?
Yeah, I want to kind of dovetail, pun intended, peace pun intended, on your idea about preparation, because when you work with a team, you get to prepare as a team. And at least for me, and I think maybe for everybody involved on our team, the team itself and the mission, so to speak, itself is a source of calm. And I have my vest right here. We have our peace team vest, and it's a talisman for peace. It's when you put it on, it itself, that action is calming. So that, and along the line, somebody mentioned connecting with people that they respect that can help calm them, and that reminded me of something I do sometimes, which is to recall the words of those who have that effect on me. I'll think of, for example, Thich Nhat Hanh or perhaps MLK or other inspirations that I can aspire to in the moment. So that helps as well.
Thank you, Soraya. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the next presenter, and I don't have that list in front of me. So whoever's in charge of the L, it's your turn. Or rather L, sorry.
Do you want me to do that, Tom? Is that right? Or did we want to go into?
Yeah, it's on you, Soraya. Can I mention one more thing that is a little bit related to the C, but for me, it's a helpful preparation, which is to say to myself, at least, for today, I'm on the peace team, and that means that this campaign or this organization, this coalition, this is actually the paramount thing today, that I am not. So I am volunteering to do kind of what you're leading into, which is to have that calm that Adam talked about and that you talked about, but that prepares me to do the next part that you're talking about, which is to listen and to elicit from people. So it's that reminder, like you have to let go of your normal ego, your normal defensiveness. I'm talking to myself now. As a profoundly flawed person, I have to kind of run down my checklist and eliminate the things that get in the way of me being a good member of the peace team.
Okay, so I'll talk about listening. So we are already doing that here. Yes, we've all been doing that already. And many people have chimed in with their suggestions and have already given some feedback, and there's this interactive component. So we already had a demonstration of listening and responding. Listening, like Tom just said, helps a lot when you can actually absorb the other person's input and not only be thinking of oneself. I think it was Sue Ann who mentioned something about almost stepping out of oneself. She talked about kind of leaving the distractions in a puddle and imagining stepping away from those. So listening is really about opening to the other person that you're with. It could even be a group, but it's very helpful to do it in a way where you are not prejudging, maybe jumping to any conclusions. And the calming does help with that because it helps you get perspective and step back from a cursory and maybe stereotyped view of who you're working with. So if you're willing to actually hear and see the people there that are in front of you, then you're going to get better information, and you're probably going to be more likely to avoid some of those negative responses in yourself. Or if you say, oh, I don't like this group, or this group does that, it might be harder for you to connect with them. But if you are able to open yourself up to what's really in front of you and just accurately observe, you'll probably have an easier time and you'll be more correct. So you'll probably be more likely to be successful. So listening can be really hard when somebody's yelling or somebody is escalated. However, if you're able to do it in a calm way, that can really help them calm down. There are certain ways you can listen, that there are certain techniques of listening that can help with that. For example, reflecting back, speaking slowly, attending. For example, just actually looking at the person you're talking with. You may want to give them some space. Maybe you'd like to listen from a bit of an angle. So if they want to walk away or storm away, they can, but you're still there. You're still open to what they're saying. So you're not trying to really inject your own thoughts and feelings and shoulds and this kind of thing. You're really listening to the other person. So summarizing can help. You can even sometimes just literally repeat what somebody has said, because then they know that you have heard them. You can ask some questions. You can try and reinforce what you actually find reinforceable. For example, you might find some people that you don't really agree with what they're doing, but once you speak with them, you realize that at least in their mind, they are coming out because they care so much about their community. Maybe again, you don't like their implementation of that, but you can respect and care that they care. In fact, maybe that's why you're out there too. So reflecting that piece, whatever piece seems to, that you can genuinely connect with, that can be very helpful. I'm not sure what else to say about listening right now. Thank you for listening. And Adam, I'm supposed to ask for your thoughts on this too, which goes again with the C that we were just reviewing.
Great, thank you, Soraya. And so what I'm hearing Soraya talk about is the skill of active listening. The reflection back to people, all of those are parts of actively listening. And in our society, quite often what we're doing is we're actually not listening. We're waiting till that person finishes talking so that we can get our point out, or so that we can say what needs to be said so that they understand. And when you're a peacekeeper, we don't do that. what we're doing is we're listening not only to what they're saying, but we're listening for the feelings that are behind those words so that we can understand and try to get a picture of where this person is coming from. And it's important to do that because if the people know that they're being heard, they might be up at this level yelling because they want to be heard. And as a peace team member, you can go and interact with that person, and they can go from way up here to down here just by you listening to them, because they know someone's hearing them. And what they have to say, whether we believe it or not, is very important. Okay.
Also, one practical benefit of listening is to take an escalated person out of a fight or out of a situation that can become dangerous. Like Tom said at the beginning, what we want to do is to promote nonviolence. We want to make sure people are safe. So I'm sure probably everybody on the peace team has had the experience of essentially almost kind of isolating a person that's having an argument with somebody else. You can draw them away physically. You can go speak with them off to the side. And sometimes you can even say, hey, I'm having trouble hearing you here. Would you come right over here? It's quieter, which is sincere, right? You do want to hear them, but it also really helps de-escalate the overall situation. So listening can not only be really de-escalating for that person, but for the situation itself, because then that person is directing their attention to you rather than the person that they were perhaps going to have a fight with. So that's another practical and often instantaneous benefit of listening. Adam, is that all we want to say on listening? And I would certainly welcome other people's. We have, it seems, a wealth of information and wisdom in this group. I would welcome other people's perspectives and hints and why they see listening as valuable.
And also, this is something that we need to practice too between now and when we're out peacekeeping. So when and how do we practice this? Any ideas on that? Okay, every day in every single conversation you have with every person you ever speak with. That's how you practice active listening. And you will find that your relationships are going to be stronger, healthier, and better all the way around just because you're listening actively. Absolutely.
Adam, I'm not sure what you just said, but I think if people just listened with every conversation and just really paid attention to what somebody was saying, that they would, get better skilled at listening.
Nice.
I'm kidding you. I'm kidding you.
High five right there.
Bad joke, Bruce.
Love it. Love it.
And really, everybody here has listening skills that they are using every day. So it's really just a matter of building on them and maybe trying some new specific techniques, but people already have a lot of skills, I'm sure. Kayleen, you had something to say, please.
I was just going to say that I really liked that you brought up the comment that, you can say to someone, I can see you really care about a community, or whatever. I think getting at the qualities and values that somebody is speaking to is one of the most difficult parts of listening. It's hard enough to get to feelings, but to get to the qualities and values is really difficult. But that's a wonderful thing to bring out so that everyone's honored for whatever their values are. You can check it at least in reflective listening, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I know it helps me as a peace team member to actually care about who I'm talking with, listening to, because I may have negative thoughts or judgments about their behavior and, wish that they would stop doing what they were doing, etc. And so when I genuinely can see that somebody really does care about his community, even if I don't agree with how he's, implementing that, it helps me connect better.
I want to mention a couple of things about listening to differentiate between the people who are, quote, on our side or on, quote, the other side, is that, and Soraya has done this with great effect, is to remind people, for example, who, let's say that you are out at a demonstration where somebody's called one to, quote, defend democracy. And here comes some counter demonstrators, and they are yelling imprecations at the defend democracy people that you have been invited to come and provide nonviolent security or a peace presence for. And so the big learning that I've had is from Soraya is that she went to the people who were on, quote, our side and said that the idea today is not to debate. The idea today is not to respond to the counter demonstrators. The idea is to basically ignore them. And this actually worked for her. I was at a thing at the waterfront in Portland where, yeah, she succeeded. And we've kind of folded her success into what we try to teach each other about the intervention of listening, which is kind of interesting. So that when we're intervening on maybe a counter demonstrator, we are intervening in a way that, as both Adam and Soraya have said, we're trying to take them out of play. We're trying to convince them that they don't need to escalate to fists or to tasers or to guns, because their voice is what we're interested in. We're interested in their words, and to genuinely demonstrate by our reflective listening, as Adam said, that we're interested in what they actually have to say. But listening to, quote, our side is slightly different, because we have an opportunity to talk to them as people who might be receptive to what the organizers really want. And so when Soraya was able to tell them, the organizers have asked us not to basically debate or argue with them, that succeeded. And so this is, I don't know, it might seem simple to people, but it was a pretty big learning for me. And my only other thing about listening is that active listening, I sort of equate that is with listening with humility, so that we couch our reflective listening, our responses with something that invites them to correct us. Correct me if I'm wrong, but here's what I hear you saying, or tell me if this isn't right. Whatever it is, you give them permission to correct you. And they are almost invariably, people will connect better with you when you interject that note of humility. It's just a simple little turn of phrase that helps your reflective listening become more invitational to them, and you're granting them power that they know that they should have, and that serves your goal at least as much as theirs.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point to just have that humility. Nobody's obligated to speak with you. You don't know everything. It would be a disservice to everyone involved if you pretended or thought that you did. And sometimes people do maybe get a little bit defensive about the team and that we have vests or something. Some people may see us as somewhat of authority figures, and we are a proxy in some ways for the organizers. So it can be really useful to take a one-down position and just emphasize that you don't have actual power over anybody, and just to invite them to engage if they want to.
Well, I'm wondering
I
if,
just wanted to say, Adam, you one of the things that you've talked about that has been really helpful to me is maintaining an attitude of curiosity. To me, that's the positive side of not getting in this spot and not getting in that spot and not getting in this other situation. So I don't know if you can say a few more words about that. I really like how you talk about that.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, when I'm talking to people who think differently than I do or are really upset, I become curious about who this person is. Why are they feeling the way that they're feeling? What's going on for them? And so as I'm listening, I really am listening for the feelings that are coming behind their words. And when we get to the next section, which is the A in Clara, that's what allows me to connect with the people, is because I'm curious about what are the feelings that are going on that the words are expressing. And it gives me a chance to connect with them. And then we get to the A, which is the affirm. And the second that I can actually affirm their feelings, not their words or their ideas or what they're talking about necessarily, but the feelings. Like Tom said, you really love your country. That didn't come out in the words they were saying. That came out in the feelings that were behind the words. So, and it's the curiosity that keeps me from judgment. I hope that's helpful. Any other ideas around that or around?
Can I ask a question about that? So I'm not thinking of any specific scenario, but I can imagine there would be times when I just really couldn't cultivate that curiosity, there's something about the person or what they represent to me, and I'm just repulsed.
I think I think that's a very important point, Elaine. And in that instance, you are not the peacekeeper for that moment. And so it's okay to say, you know what? I'm being triggered. I'm being affected by this person in a way that's not allowing me to do what it is that I hope to do in that situation. And it's okay to say, and we always work in teams when we're out in the field and we're usually working in groups of 2 or 3, and turning to your partner or your fellow peacekeeper and say, you know, I'm not the right one to handle this particular situation. I'll watch your back. How about you give it a shot? That's okay. It's completely fine. And recognizing that in yourself is monumental. It's huge. It's paramount, because if you're the wrong person going into the situation, you might actually escalate that situation. And that's never our goal when we're peacekeeping. So great question, Elaine. Thank you.
I always think of Saturday Night Wrestling when the big guys are out there and you know, that one guy's down and he reaches out trying to tag the next. That's what I say. You know, I'm going to tag you. I can't do this one.
Patrick, you had something to say too?
Yeah, I think also that works in reverse. There are times when you are where it's very important to build relationship with the person that you're trying to de-escalate. But also there's times when that person doesn't interact well with you personally, or that person has interacted with you for a very long time, and maybe they need to interact with somebody else to go to that next level of calming. So, you know, like if I'm interacting with somebody and they're very angry, and I've gotten to the point where they're ranting instead of throwing fists or not throwing fists, or, you know, maybe it's time for Adam to talk to the person and be a calm voice and listen and be able to drive them, you know, to push even further down into the calm zone.
Thank you, Patrick. And that's especially important, I've noticed in our interactions, especially with Patrick and I, if people have been drinking or they're under the influence of something, some maybe drugs or drinking, whatever, I've noticed that when we've done that and we've switched, it allows that person a little breather so that they can, you know, really gather what they're doing and put their thoughts together a little better. And then when the other person comes in, it's been quite effective.
Adam and Patrick, how do you do the handoff? How do you pass the baton? Or how do you, as Pat was saying, you know, tag team and say, hey, my turn, let me get in there? Or, you know, I mean, sounds like it's either the person that's involved says, hey, I need help. And how do you do that? Or the person that is not involved says, oh, I think it's my turn, let me step in. How do you switch?
Honestly,
all of the above.
Yeah, and I think it's body language. I think it's working with each other and recognizing the signals that, oh, maybe what this person is saying or doing isn't as effective as they would hope it to be. Am I in a position where I feel comfortable, number one, putting myself into that, and number two, saying, can I help here? You know, or I have an idea, or, you know, it could be anything. But what I've noticed with our group is typically everybody gets the vibe from everybody else. I don't think it's necessarily a verbal thing, more a body language, at least from my perspective. Any other ideas on that?
Yeah, I was thinking we usually probably talk a lot of the time to the person that the other person's talking to. That is, we might use nonverbals to make that kind of decision within ourselves, but we might go up to the person the other person's talking to and say, hey, I heard your conversation, I had some thoughts, or I wanted to hear more, or whatever. And we might say, oh, Patrick, could you go talk to Adam, or whatever, if that person is willing to talk to you. So you just kind of you get their buy-in to that they're willing to talk to you.
So Adam, it's pretty easy to do a quick role play here. I mean, you could have for example, you could be yourself and I could be somebody on the far right that's coming down to downtown Portland right now. And excuse me, I don't understand why you're here, and I want to support Trump, and you need to get the heck out of my way.
You want to do a role play right
I'm
now?
doing a role play right now, and you're being attacked.
Okay, I definitely appreciate the idea.
Yeah, you're saying
a lot of stuff to do in this short period of time. If we have time at the end, I would love to do that with you.
Okay, that's all right. I want to just say that there are people with a lot of questions here, and a quick role play sometimes teaches more than talking. It's just a suggestion. And I understand you've got an agenda, so I will back off, but I was trying to push you a little bit.
I do appreciate that. Thank you, Patty. And if we do have time at the end, I would love to run. Absolutely. Okay, so are there any other ideas around that? We do need to get on to the next portion. We have about 30 minutes, I think. Okay. So I believe Pat is up.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah, sorry, I had to just race away and get my cord. It's a violation of basic Zoom etiquette to run out of power in the middle. So we're going to move on to the A, affirm. And I'm going to say a couple of things here, and then I'm going to have Kayleen just repeat what she said before, because it was so brilliant, so exactly right on. So Kayleen, I'll just give you a minute here, and then I'm going to put you on the spot. But it's like, for me, this is actually the reward part of peacekeeping. if I have done a good job of centering, if I have found my safe place inside and been able to stay there, if I have been able to listen, and this is so key to everything that was said, if I've really been able to listen to this person, then this is the point at which I connect, right? This is the point at which I take all my centering and everything that I can do to be present and all my listening, and I say to myself, how do these two hearts, mine and this one, how can we connect? And Kayleen, I think you've got it, so you tell us, will you?
Well, I had just mentioned that it's one thing to identify feelings, which is plenty challenging, but when you identify values, that often really connects. And, you know, things like that they might feel responsible, or that they might feel that they're trying to create a safe environment. You know, they may be wanting to create a safe environment, or that they value that that there be a recognition of investment in their community somehow. Anyway, those are things where identifying values is pretty challenging, actually, but it is something that if you reach inside yourself, you see what you value and you can think about how they might have an equal value. Might not be your value, but it would be of equal weight for them. Is that what you wanted, Pat?
Yes, thank you. Exactly. So I know that if you're here, you've already done that, right? This is not a new experience for you, right? You've been in that spot when someone who is struggling, someone who is maybe a little escalated, right? You've been able to hear that value, right? That you can connect with. So tell me about it. I know you have them, so please. Come on, Rosie. You're nodding up and down. I know you've got it.
I was listening to a woman on a bridge at Fort Lewis, and she was there for her son, who was in the Army, and she was very, very escalated with these people who wanted the war to be over. And so I just listened to her and connected with her feeling of keeping her children safe and her family. And I could, you know, it took a little while actually to hear her, but it was a real heartfelt aha moment of connection.
Sue Ann, please.
Now, I haven't done this in the situations you're talking about, but I come from a background as a mediator. And one thing I would say, kind of building on what you've said already, is we call them underlying interests, what you're calling values, but they don't have to be something that I share at all. I can still hear what's motivating that person, and it's always in a positive way. So it's not revenge is motivating you, but your concern for justice or whatever it is. And even if what motivates them doesn't resonate with me personally, if I can identify it, it still makes that kind of a connection, I think.
Who's raising their hand? Oh, there it is. Bruce. Yeah, I knew. Okay, go ahead.
I was thinking the same thing as Sue Ann. She and I both come from with mediation training background, and I was thinking about the concept of affirm sounds a lot like getting to yes, which is the old Fisher-Urey book from the Harvard Negotiation Project that basically gave us the concept that people say A, not A, oh, A, not A, not A. And as long as you stay there and just argue back and forth, you can be locked. But if you ask the question, why do you want A? Why do you want not A? Not necessarily in exactly those words. And that gets back to Adam's curiosity, just being, questions and, tell me more about that. I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're getting at here. I don't understand where does this go for you? What if you do this, if this happens, what's the good thing that happens or what's the bad thing that's avoided? Tell me more about that. Those kinds of things. You can get to the point where you say, oh, yeah, so what you're saying is this is valuable to you. Yeah, boy, yes, absolutely. Me too. I'm still not quite seeing the path that you're going to get there, but you and I share the same goal. We want to get to that point of public safety, people being respected, people being honored by their meritorious work in proportion to the risk and the reward and whatever the values might be. But that getting to yes, to me, seems a way of connecting, or in the therapeutic language, developing rapport. Therapists talk about, one of the first steps in therapy is that you want to develop a rapport with the other person before you can ever go to challenging anything that they might be saying, because they'll just write you off. At any rate, I don't know, Pat, what do you think? Am I on the right track with this?
Well, I also want to check in with Kayleen, because I saw a frown on your face, Kayleen. Now,
You have to know that my frown is always that I'm thinking.
okay.
It was not a judgment.
All right. Well, I will say, just one story. I don't know exactly that it fits here, but I went to the Children's Climate March, or the Kids Climate March, or whatever it was, downtown Portland, and kids got out of school, and it was there, and everything was just like rolling, and the kids energy was so great and all that, and so I just went around everyone I saw, right, these groups, and I said, hey, I'm so happy you're out. Thanks for coming out. This is a great deal. And I went to some Black Bloc kids. I do the same routine, right? Hey, glad you're here. Nice to see you. And one of the Black Bloc kids said, well, yeah, but sometimes making a poster and shouting something ain't enough. And so I said, oh, okay. Well, anyway, glad you're here. And as part of the peace team, I got a note, that said, hey, down a half a block, there's some kids out there. They're alt-right. They're wearing flags and flag shirts and all that kind of stuff. So I went down there, did my same routine, right? Hey, how are you? Really glad that you're down here. Nice to see you here. And this kid said, he said, this is my town too, and I care about the climate. Not what I expected at all. Right. So I'm like still learning from that experience, and turn my head around like I was a damn owl, and I'm looking out the back of my head or something. Yeah, anyway, but there are these moments, if we can find them, when this connection will change us. And it requires a little bit of courage on our part to be willing to change, to actually learn something rather than, in other words, we de-escalate together, if you will. It's a service that we provide each other. So more on the affirm. Anybody have something to say? Experience that you've had?
So I would like to echo what Sue Ann said, and in reference actually to the very same, both Pat and I were out for at least two of the climate strikes that the youth had organized, which was, talk about inspirational. I mean, those school children out on the street saying we deserve a future. That was that hit my heart really, really hard. And that day, we really had an opportunity, or at least I did, to do kind of what Sue Ann said, which is to connect in a shared sense, even though our everything wasn't all lined up, and even though we had different goals, in the end, we had kind of the same. And the situation was that a dad came down. He was extremely angry. Nobody was able to sort of de-escalate him. The police shoved him off onto the Portland Peace Team because they're happy to do that whenever they find somebody who's being weird and obstreperous, but not actually breaking any particular law. They'll say, "Go talk to those people over there." And so I wound up with this dad, and I spent a lot of time with him, and so I listened as Sue Ann was talking about, until I figured out that these are the points where we connect. This is our shared identity. And I told him we've got this that we share, is that we're both dads. We both care about our kids. That you care about your kid is really obvious, and you actually remind me of my former brother-in-law. In fact, you could pass for his brother. And so we got into that add information stage in the Clara process, where I had listened to him long enough, and I think somebody might need to mute themselves. I'm not sure, or maybe it's me. I don't know. That basically we connected, and that was enough for him, so that by the time he did actually find his daughter amongst the thousands of people, he was ready to accept that a school official who had come out with them, a school official who was basically supporting these children, would take responsibility for bringing his daughter back to the school. And until that point, he was just, he was a pretty burly guy, and he was pretty much ready to take everybody on. And there were some high school boys who were ready to basically take him on physically. So we had to de-escalate that, and then getting him in shape to be able to have a rational conversation with the school officials. And his poor daughter, she was only 12, and she was all made up to look like a forest creature. And she was crying so hard when her father was so escalated that her makeup as a forest creature was running down her face. I will never forget that. And the I guess the upshot was, I think, since the police weren't interested in doing anything, since the school officials didn't have, they were kind of viewed by this guy as the enemy, that the Portland Peace Team was really the only hope in that moment. And we collaborated to kind of make everything work out. And I think that this is always our goal. And when we're able to do these various skills, so that we can actually, add that little bit of information, that connection. And I will say that we can't add that information until we've listened for quite a while. If we start with adding information, that is only going to escalate people. But once they feel like they've been heard, then they can be a little bit open to us adding that information, which is, sometimes pretty darn helpful.
Tom,
Thanks, Tom.
I want to add a couple of small pieces about affirming. They're really, really simple ones, but Adam's doing one of them right now. Nodding, right? Just yes, I agree with what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. Just literally nodding your head. That's an affirm skill. Just saying, yeah, or I heard that, or that makes sense, or just these even tiny comments along the way. Literally something as short as, yeah, or I see that. That can really help too. Speaking of within affirmation.
And I think it doesn't have to be that you come to a point where you agree with them and find agreement, but just you can express understanding even if you don't agree.
Exactly.
Well, I was so fortunate in this assignment that I actually got 3 letters. I got the A, R, and A. Some people only get 1, but I got 3. And so we just did the affirm, CLA, and now we're going to do the R and the A. And Tom, you had a very nice introduction to these two already, right? And I think if I, kind of, piggyback on you, that there's a reason that this respond and this add information are at the end of Clara and not at the beginning. It's so important it is. So in fact, we kind of, if we get to these, and it's not that often, but if we get to these, we've already affirmed, right? We've already, this person and I, at some level, have already connected, right? So we're much closer now to a conversation, right? I tell you, I've been here so rarely myself. I rarely get to these points. I'm going to ask a few of the other team members to chime in with an example, or if you have any examples, right, where you're got to the point where you're able to converse, add information, respond, so forth.
I just want to add, just for a frame of reference, the reason we don't get to the RNA typically is because by the time we're at the first A, the person has come from this level down to this level, and they're already calm. So we're able to say, this was a great conversation. I appreciate your time. And then we're, as a team, looking for the next hotspot that needs our attention. And that's not to say that we're not going to be with that person as long as we're needed with that person. But once that person's de-escalated, it's time for us to move on and help the next people or the next group. And a part of that too is quite often the people that we are de-escalating are people that are there with the group we're actually representing. It's not always the people across the way that are doing things that may make the organization look bad, or maybe doing something that that the organizers have explicitly said they don't want done. So a lot of the de-escalation is just reminding the people that we're not there to yell at the other people. We're not there to do the things that you're about to do. We're not throwing Molotov cocktails today, that sort of thing. That was a joke, I hope. But the point is that we don't get to the RNA often because by then everybody's just already de-escalated. So.
All right. Usually, go ahead.
I'm thinking of an example about respond. I had somebody, there was a impeachment thing. We were there, and somebody that did not agree with the idea of impeachment asked me, well, can we impeach Kate Brown? And I don't know the answer to that. So I told him, yeah, I'm not sure about that. You might have to research it. But I took it seriously and didn't say, well, probably it's not the word impeach, it's a different word for the governor, or get into some silly argument. I just took it seriously and said, yeah, I don't know about that. But that helped. He actually seemed calmer after I took him seriously and said I didn't know the answer. And the add information might be, I'm going to make explicit what a couple people have already alluded to obliquely, that the process whereby I got some people to calm down was we were at an event where we had the explicit policy of disengaging with people who come to argue and abuse you. That was a policy of the event. And so when that seemed particularly relevant and needed, I asked the organizer, hey, could you make a reminder of this rule over the megaphone? And then I'll go remind our side, because they're going to be cooperative, right? They have come to this event. So I come and say, hey, just want to remind you that there's a rule against this, or the organizer asked us to not do this behavior. And they have cooperated, which has been really nice. And then the person that was arguing with them just doesn't have anyone to argue with again anymore. So that has actually totally de-escalated the situation. So I guess that might be an add information or an example of reminding somebody of relevant information. That has been very effective.
Yeah, thanks, Soraya. I think I saw you in action there. And we do have these letters, and sometimes some people are so effective at de-escalating that we have to come back later and figure out which letter that went under, but we know it worked. Yeah.
One of the things that we've benefited from in our trainings is learning from those who participate in our trainings, as I'm sure we're doing today. So for example, Pat Adams and I were doing some trainings, getting ready for the very first major women's thing that was scheduled for Trump's inauguration, the most massive outpouring of civil society in American history. And it was also in Portland. But one of the trainings that we did, and it was way over in Southeast Portland. I remember not knowing where the heck this place was, and then it turned out to be an old Bernie Sanders headquarters, and it was appropriately dingy and unheated, middle of winter. It was kind of perfect. And Pat did a beautiful calming section, and I sort of chimed in and helped a little bit. But then one of the trainees, this young woman, said, well, when I've de-escalated people, it's usually because I give them a great big smile. And it was like the most simple, beautiful advice, because that's what she did as she was instructing us about this. And it was perfect. It was like, it was almost like a light bulb moment where, of course, when you come on to people like you're happy to see them, it's a lot harder for them to be unhappy to see you or anybody else around you. So this is what we try to do as we engage in teaching. We try to fold those lessons that we learned from those who are, supposedly getting our training into our own practice and our future training. And this, it happens every time we go out. When afterward we go out and have a French fry together and say, well, what did we learn today? Invariably, we have learned something. And I know that Soraya and Patrick learned a couple things and did a couple moves fairly recently this summer in the BLM stuff downtown at night, where things were pretty gnarly that really kind of helped. And this is the kind of thing where if we're aware of our surroundings, if we're clicked into what a lot of the people are worried about, we can come up with a response to help reduce their level of stress. I wonder if Patrick Nolan would be willing to talk about this this guy that he basically helped to he helped a guy to survive a bunch of people who were sort of on top of him, but he was kind of an almost a pseudo evangelical Jesus kind of guy with his own sound system, very powerful amplified sound system. He was making his moves toward the stage, toward the microphone. And so Patrick and I and some other people who weren't necessarily trained in on peace stuff were trying to de-escalate and help move this fellow away with his big sound system. Patrick, would you be willing to talk about what you came up with?
As long as I don't lag out. I'm having some lag problems, and I'm sorry if that is affecting me. We were downtown, and we were far enough away from the stage that we were having a hard time hearing the stage and this gentleman. And am I lagging?
You're fine.
Doing great.
Okay, great. And I noticed that up the block there were several police officers watching this gentleman that was there with his microphone and everything. And it occurred to me that I was probably not going to be able to be in a position by myself or with Tom to be able to stop people from hurting this man, because he was definitely in a position where he was trying to instigate some sort of violent response, it felt like. And so I asked the person that was kind of the ringleader of the people that were engaged with him and were trying to start some sort of violent action. Hey, do you think it's possible this guy is a agent provocateur with the police? And the ringleader kind of looked at me, and the guy that was trying to instigate the problem kind of looked at me, and it all of a sudden calmed down, and everybody kind of circled around this guy and moved him towards the edge of the crowd and gave him back to the police who were standing there waiting. And it wasn't. I'm not sure if he was a undercover police officer or not, but I'm not sure that he wasn't, because he definitely had a very interesting response when I asked. And like I said, I think it was the correct or a correct answer. I'm not sure if it was as good as we could get, but it was the best I had at that particular moment.
Well, I was there, Patrick, and as you know, I mean, this guy had made like 3 sincere advances on the stage, and he was a pretty big guy. Definitely, Patrick's insight about potentially a police agent was, I think, kind of likely. Very fit, very big, very muscular, very insistent. It's like, I mean, why would anybody want to go someplace where obviously nobody wanted them? And yet he just kept persisting, coming back and back and back. People were shoving him. People were disconnecting his sound system and everything else. It was not until Patrick, with a moment of insight, said this, that everything de-escalated from that point on, and this guy was out of play. I mean, I think this is the kind of creativity that we're kind of called to, is opening ourselves to thinking about things in a truly inquisitive fashion, which is very hard to do if we're trying to maintain a line of argument, which we're not trying to do when we're peacekeepers. So I just thought that was a moment of genius that Patrick had, because this guy was not de-escalatable by any other means. And Patrick found that after, like, this was an hour at least, where this guy was repeatedly trying to get in to basically cancel the sound system.
Lindsay, I wanted to answer your question. Was the moving him a physical touching or thing, or did you just have enough folks to form a U around him and that forced him to move? Nobody touched him. It was just kind of like the crowd kind of moved in one direction and he was kind of moved along with the crowd, which obviously there was touching, but nobody was shoving him or twisting arms or engaging with him directly. Just the crowd all of a sudden, it was a pretty big scrum. It was yeah, it was definitely not just me that did the moving. I was there and I followed along to make sure. I was more worried about this guy getting beat up than anything else. And at that point, I was just wanting to make sure that I could get him safely out of the crowd.
It was a serious safety question. I mean, things got so pressed in. It was like COVID precautions were done for anybody who was involved. He and I were literally chest to chest. And it wasn't because I was trying to shove him. It was because we were so crammed in together. And at one point, when I was literally pressed up against this guy, nose to nose, well, I mean, I'm looking up at him. He's a pretty big guy. Enough other people were involved. A whole section of fencing went down. We all went down with a section of fencing. Any one of these points could have been an escalatory moment of kind of disaster. It could have been a headline. And I think because the peace team was there, that's just my opinion. There's no way to sort of, prove a counterfactual. But I think that we kind of kept everything on a relatively civilized basis, even though things were happening like entire fence sections were falling down. And then when Patrick did that, it was a magic moment to me. It evaporated everything.
And if I can add to that, I think one of the functions of the peace team is preventing these things from ever getting to that point. And I think we do that a lot. There have been a lot of rallies or events that I've been to where people will look at us, will observe us, will see our smocks or whatever that say peace team in big letters, and they feel better. They say, thanks for being here. I'm thinking of, for example, Pride, where there were some severe haters one year that we were there, and we ended up almost protecting them more than the rest of the crowd because of numbers, essentially. But yeah, people I think are less likely to escalate in the first place because they see us present.
I think it's also important to know that it's we're as a peace team member, we're not there to try to change a person's life direction or make a person all of a sudden realize that they're wrong and we're right. Our action is mostly there to be a person that says, okay, can we talk about this tomorrow or the next day? And can we talk about it non-violently? So there isn't a fight in the middle of the rally that has invited us there, because in the grand scheme of things, I see the peace team as kind of a PR group. We're there to make sure that the public relations of our side goes well, and so in the media the next day, it isn't there were 40,000 people there and a riot broke out. That's not the media the next day.
Have you run into a situation where a group of people are just not buying into the whole peaceful demonstration plan. For instance, throwing things at police, or more directly confronting the opposite side. Just saying, I'm going to throw things at the police, or I'm going to, do some property damage, and you're not going to tell me what to do otherwise. I mean, in other words, the ideal situation would seem that, everyone would sign a nonviolent pledge of some sort. But, if you have a few rogue people just not buying into that, is there really much opportunity to step in and intervene and use these skills that you've been talking about?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, what has happened in the past is when we have a group that is avowedly nonviolent, and they've made that very public, and there are trained peacekeepers there, then violence can break out. Art, you're exactly right that this happens. And our role at that point is to basically tell everybody else if it's a march, we ask them to keep moving. We've got this, and we'll make sure that this person isn't hurt, but this person is not representing this event. And then we make that clear to the media, we make that clear to the police, but we do monitor that person is not abused. And this has happened more than once. I mean, I remember once we had literally 40,000 people in the streets of Portland, and a young guy came down in the context of this demonstration that was advertised as being family friendly, pretty relentlessly. And Michael Kerrigan from Eugene and I had trained in 90 peacekeepers. And so we had everything covered up and down Portland. And this kid came out of nowhere and just started jumping up and down on the roof of a police car. And it was like he was acting on his own, and we cordoned off the area, kept people moving, and we did make sure that he was not mistreated. But we also made sure, and it was reported in the media, including the local Fox affiliate, that this was not connected to the main event. That's the best we can do. We are not going to convince this young man that he shouldn't come with the idea that he's going to engage in whatever he wants to engage in. All we have to do at that point is basically isolate him from us. That's the role of the peace team at that point, and then to make sure that the media and the police understand that.
And another thing that I'll add is just to reiterate what Tom said already. We don't go to everything. Not everyone invites us, and we don't go to everything. So there are many rallies and events that occur that have no interest in the peace team, that don't have a commitment to nonviolence, and they will not solicit our services, and we will not offer them. So there are some circumstances where we wouldn't try, wouldn't go to those.
Getting back to the question, I think it's really important also to recognize that there are those alt-right and the alt-left people that specifically are either wanting to start something or looking for somebody to start something. And the answer then is the relationship you've already built. We were at the Women's March a couple of years ago, and the Native American contingent was going to be at the front of the march. And they were queuing up, and somebody had forgotten to block off the street. Well, so there was a huge kerfluffle happening, and at the same time, the alt-right and Antifa had decided that they were going to create something of their own problem they were mumbling back and forth at each other, and I happened to know one of the people that was there in a leadership capacity with the alt left, and I asked him if he could have some of his people help people move their cars back to move to another lane, and he was very happy to be involved in something constructive. And instead of having a fist fight with the alt-right people, their people were moving cars, helping people move cars out of the way. And I think that is very key in a lot of senses, is to build that relationship early and often with people.
Well, it sounds like you're very evolved as a community in having a peace team that is identifiable. I mean, some of us are in communities where, the demonstrations are mounting, big rallies and counter rallies, and no one is identified as being, as keeping the peace. I would think that would be a great thing to work on.
I mean, we don't go out unless we're invited, and that's one of our challenges, Art. Certainly during the whole uprising that followed the murder of George Floyd, we don't presume to tell anybody, African Americans, how to liberate themselves, so that we don't go out. We were invited out to BLM events, mostly during the day, around town, and we were very happy to accompany them, and we did. And of course, they, we worked with them on our usual protocols. But the stuff that was sort of scheduled for, this starts at in the night and goes on indefinitely. We're not peace vigilantes. We don't go out trying to tell people how to behave themselves when they're out engaging in whatever cathartic behavior that serves them. But when organizers put in serious effort to organize an event, and they ask us to help, that's when we take it really, really seriously, is that these organizers put in a lot of work. Every single one of the people on this call, I would bet, has helped to or has led the organization of some kind of demonstration, event, creative action, whatever. And those are the people we want to serve, are the people who put in the work, and they deserve to have that help. So when the Albino Ministerial Alliance, they're an organization of African American ministers, when they call on us, we are there every single time. When the refugees and immigrants call on us to help, we're there every single time, happy to do so. If we're not called, we don't interfere. And this has been heart-wrenching, frankly, in the past few months in Portland, to watch this stuff. Basically, if you look at the polls, when this uprising started on, following May Day, nationally, the polls were in excess of 60% of Americans were supporting the goals and the actions of the uprising. By the time riots and looting and window breaking and throwing stuff at the cops, when that stuff broke out and when that stuff continued in Portland, worse than anywhere, then the national polls went down to below 40% of the people supported that. And this was, to me, tragic. It was heartbreaking, but it was like, it's not our role to step in. Things, frankly, are at a different point now. We are moving into election protection. This is not about the liberation of any one identity group. This is about every single person. So we we're getting much more engaged at this point, and sort of ready to help organizers defend what they need defended.
It occurred to me, this might be helpful. We have these little cards. Let me see if I can see my screen. We have these little cards that we hand out. They say to anyone who asks, "Hey, what's the peace team?" We give these little cards out. I kept mine. I have mine in my smock or vest or whatever it is. It just says what we do. And a lot of people, of course, as you can imagine, say, "Oh, I might want to have y'all come out." But it just, people are curious, and having these to hand out is really helpful. So I just wanted to add that.
So I also want to bring up something that hasn't been brought up so far, and that's, what do we do if weapons come out? And I think that, especially after reading, some of the concerns in the newspaper article that Bruce sent, and hearing some of the concerns on the street about, guns being present and weapons being present. And I think, as peacekeepers, we have a responsibility to keep those things in mind, number one. But number two, we have to have pre-planned and pre-thought out, what am I going to do if? What is the possibility of something happening? If we haven't thought about it, we're not going to have a plan or a way to get out of it. And so I'm encouraging you, everybody on this call, if you want to be a peacekeeper, you need to be thinking about the things that are possible. And you need to be planning for scenarios for those possibilities. And the reality is, if you're there as a peacekeeper, people will be looking to you. What do I do? Guns just came out. They're going to run. You're going to be giving directions. You're going to be telling, people how to get where they need to go. But you need to know those things beforehand. So if you're going to plan to be at some sort of organized event, you need to have an understanding of the surrounding area, and you need to have an understanding of exit points, and be thinking about those things together as a team, and planning for and preparing for those things that might happen, might not happen. But if you're thinking about it, at least you'll have, some idea of what to do, rather than in the moment having to make those decisions.
So I think too, Bruce, you're going to have to cut us off when you want to cut us off.
So we're headed to 8:30 is the advertised time. And so if people have questions, I've got about 10 that I could ask to prime the pump, but I don't want to interrupt you guys either. So if other folks have questions and you're open to questions and answers, that's fine. Otherwise, go ahead, Tom, Adam, the rest of you, go ahead and finish your presentation.
I think we're done with our presentation. I think, this is obviously triggering thoughts from everybody, presenters and participants alike. For me, I really like Adam's question about the weapons, and that is a really individual decision, but the most important thing, as he said, is to think about this ahead of time. The only time I've had a weapon pointed at me was actually at a missile silo, and it was an Air Force guy, who pointed a military long gun at my chest. And it was instructive to me in the moment. I mean, I was able to tell him, frankly, effectively, look, I respect you, brother. I just don't respect that weapon. You can lower that, which he did. I wouldn't expect anything that sanguine necessarily to happen in the context of a chaotic demonstration. This was a late night vigil at this, missile silo, and that's my only experience with it. We don't generally have a bunch of weapons on display where we're at. Areas where there are, I just met today with a lot of people from Michigan. That's an open carry state, and as everybody on this call knows, they are in the middle of pretty chaotic time. They have peace teams all over that state, and they're mobilized. And to me, they are an example of some real bravery in this time, because they have to defend polling places, whereas in Washington and Oregon, that is a tiny question. We're given the grace of a little bit more time to prepare, because most of our ballots are mail-in, or walk it over or drive it over to your local ballot drop. And there can be minor instances for us, but this stuff is underway right now in places like Michigan. So
there's a couple of people that I'm noticing that I haven't heard from, and I'd just like to touch, touch there and see, what you have to say, or your reaction. Lila, we haven't heard from you, have we?
No, not yet.
So, do you have a comment or a question, or?
Well, I kind of took interest when the topic of weapons was brought up, because my main focus and project is nuclear weapon disarmament. And so, I just found that really interesting. And also, like, in ways other than like rallies or protests, when like a peace team can, come into play, and like in what sort of ways, in different ways besides like big gatherings, do some of those tactics, arise, and how can you use them?
Anybody want to take that one?
Well, I wanted to mention that we also go to government functions. Sometimes we have a city commissioner who invites us frequently to her like budget meetings and things like that. She has community meetings, and she's just pretty, maybe she's just being a little safety conscious, and we've never had difficulties at her meetings that I recall. But it's not just rallies that we attend. It's also some, things that should be kind of boring, but I think people like having us there. So thanks for asking that piece.
2 or 3 times.
Rick, oh, sorry, Patrick, go ahead.
2 or 3 times we were vibes watchers at the Native American Rehabilitationist. I can't remember their whole name, but they are in North Portland, and they hold events once in a while. And we came as vibes watchers a couple times to when it was just when I'm not sure how to word it, but we were there as vibes watchers to make sure that if people felt uncomfortable and needed somebody to talk to about what they were feeling, we could do that. And we were, like I said, I can only think of that happening a couple times, but we have done other things. Yeah. I think Adam was there too.
We actually do a lot of community training as well. And that's for me, that's the biggest part of being on the peace team, is actually sharing this skill set with other people so that they can go out into the world and be effective in their peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace building. So that the main focus for me is actually the educational side. Now, showing up for organizations that are, nonviolent and want to have, peace be the focus of what they're doing, also it just extends the work of what, the peace team does. So if you wanted to invite us to one of your events, for example, if you had something going on and you just wanted a peaceful presence there, we're happy to show up for things like that.
So Rick, I don't think we've heard from you tonight, have we?
I'm just listening. I'm with Tacoma FOR. I don't know that I'll have an opportunity to be on a peace team, but I'm interested in supporting nonviolent demonstrations, and I'm aware I was living in Spokane for quite a while during, this is probably 9, 10 years ago with PJALs, and helped with some demonstrations. And I remember one time when we were trying to keep everything non-confrontational, and people that I think that styled themselves as anarchists blocked traffic. And I remember kind of feeling helpless at that point, to be nonviolent and non-confrontational, and yet have these people kind of take over in a way that was counterproductive to what we were hoping to do. So I guess I'm an interested observer, an old guy, an old nurse, who's kind of laying low even with my volunteer activities right now, because I'm concerned about not picking up COVID-19 before I have to, and protecting my wife. So that's kind of where I'm coming from right now.
Thanks, Rick.
I was going to follow up briefly on Rick and Lila's comments, because part of what the Western Washington FOR is trying to do right now is getting into this, protect the election planning. But one of those efforts is this, which is to try to encourage peacekeeping skills and the potential of a peace team development within Washington state. But we see that as primarily for maintaining nonviolent discipline for mass centralized actions like marches and rallies. A lot of people all in the same place at the same time. We're also, though, looking at, and Rivera's son, who was a presenter just a week ago, wrote an article on when emptying the streets is safer than filling them. And the idea of designing tactics of dispersion or decentralized actions, so mass decentralized actions that may be just as effective as mass centralized actions in getting media publicity, but being less vulnerable to violent flanks, to police repression, and maybe even to pandemic spread, and more in line with people in small groups, like affinity groups, doing those actions where they know each other, so less vulnerable to provocateurs than mass actions where everybody can just sort of blend in as an individual, also less vulnerable to black bloc, let's take over this march and get our signs out in front of the march and make it look like it's our march, kinds of tactics. Wondered if you folks had any thoughts about the role of peacekeeping, particularly in a time like now where we're potentially looking at mass actions that are centralized, but perhaps not necessarily well planned, or not necessarily going to be contained by what the organizers do, because there might be just such an upswell. Does the peacekeeper have a role in a situation, I guess, somewhat similar to post George Floyd? There's a fairly, sort of spontaneous amount of action on the street that wasn't necessarily planned in that way ahead of time. Anyway, that's several questions rolled into one.
Woo!
I think it's important to do that, to do a lot of legwork beforehand. For example, Tom can tell you the story about going out before a series of marches and talking to people with the black bloc crowd or alt left or whatever you want to call them, and saying, hey, we won't tell you how to run your marches or your rallies, but when you show up for ours, please understand that we have a set of rules and that we want them followed, and we want to work with that set of rules. And it's there again, it's about building relationship, I think. And I I do think we want to make sure that Lindsay and Deb's questions get answered as well. But I wanted to talk about, I've never had a Proud Boy specifically point a weapon at me, but I used to work for an organization called Sisters of the Road, which is a nonprofit cafe in downtown Portland, in Old Town. And it's a place where you can volunteer for your meal, or you can spend $1.25 for your meal. And we used to get a lot of people that were homeless, dealing with mental health crises, and everybody came there to eat because it was cheap. And I have had to ask people if they could give me their knife, because we couldn't have a knife there because it was violent, and you have to put the knife away and you have to give it to me so I can put it in my drawer. Or the founder of the organization used to tell a story about having to explain to somebody that they couldn't light their neighbor that was sitting next to them at the table on fire, because the person at the time felt that was an important thing to do. And I guess it's to me, it's just really important to come to even that person that has the weapon with an open heart and saying, I've actually told people, you're scaring the shit out of me, so I know you're scaring all them, and you have accomplished what you're aiming for, which was to scare people. So let's step back from scaring people now.
I think it's really important to answer Deb's question. I'm going to do it with a little story that happened back in June 4th of 2016. There was a huge alt-right event going on at Terry Shrunk Plaza, and the peace team had been invited to support a group that was across the street. And showing up at this event on June 4th was a guy that looked like a gladiator. And he was one of the Proud Boy group, and he wore armor and carried a weapon. And there was a young woman there that was supporting the peace team named Linda. She's actually an educator down in Corvallis. And at one point, he was yelling at her, and she asked him, "Why do you hate me so much when I love you?" That simple question. And then they went on to have about an hour-long conversation together. And after that conversation, the very next day, he quit the organization. He stopped doing what he was doing. And this guy was high up in the organization. People really looked up to him. And there was a story in the newspaper. I'll try and find it and share it with you. But just that interaction with Linda and their conversation changed the way that he perceived the world. And I want to share another little short one. We were at the airport, and we were doing an event for some immigrants and refugees who were against the Trump ban. And there was a bunch of children there. And the Proud Boys were coming in really close. And Tom, I think he said something like, "Don't harm the children." And one of the Proud Boys' face went from to, "They think we're going to hurt the kids." And this guy turned around and moved his entire group back 20 feet. So there are people that we may say, "Oh, he's a Proud Boy. He's this, he's that, he's the other." The reality is these are human beings that still have the possibility of connection. And if we're not sitting there prejudging them for what they are and who they are and what they believe, we have the opportunity to create change within our dynamic together within that situation, and possibly for the rest of their lives. So it's good that we don't make the assumption that because this person is a Proud Boy and because they're behaving in this way, they're this. Because they might be something completely different. different. And we don't know it until we go through Clara and find out if that's the case.
And if we can't change their group affiliation forever the next day, maybe we can take them down to a moderate level or even mild level of escalation for half an hour. And then people at that rally aren't going to be scared for that half an hour or the rest of the day. And I, for one, am satisfied with that.
Me too.
Say, for someone not familiar with your model, the Clara model, could you just tell us quickly what the R and the second A stand for?
Pat
Well,
Adams.
I got it. I got it.
Are we going to
So
share
that's-
that document with anybody?
I'm
We
getting
should
it right
share the document. Okay, great.
Yeah, it'll come out. So the R and the A there is respond, and there's add. And I think both Adam and Tom, and I think even Soraya talked a little bit about that. And it's just, if we get this far again and don't have to move on to the next issue, which is quite often, just to having listened and then having affirmed and having a relative confidence that I understand what the issues are and what's been presented, then that would be the response part, right? About what's going on for me around this, right? Friend, we're friends now. So what's going on? And then I think the other thing was the ad, the final ad was there may be some factual information that this person that I'm talking with doesn't have that might shift their thinking a little bit about the issue, and that would change their feelings. So I might have that. If I have it, then I would just say, well, this is what I know about this situation, kind of a thing. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I realized you had gone over it. I just hadn't connected those behaviors with the R and the A,
Okay.
abbreviation. Thank you.
Okay, Art, thanks.
And this stuff can't happen. I mean, when we do our trainings on a short turnaround basis, we often say who, in other words, if they come out an hour ahead of time for some quick peacekeeper training like Adam referred to in the huge demonstration in 2016, which was it raised quite a bit of dust in Portland, the first question that we ask is, okay, who is an activist? And all the hands shoot up, and then we say, but not today, not in the normal sense. You're still serving this campaign, but in a different way. And so we don't lead with the ad information. We don't lead with a response because people are not ready to hear it until you develop that relationship. And to me, I sort of revert to our wonderful founder of Sisters of the Road. Patrick and I both have her as our all-time heroine, as Jenny Nelson, who was in turn a follower of Dorothy Day. And as an old Catholic worker, I mean, I really subscribe to Dorothy Day's original philosophy, which she called gentle personalism. And it simply means that when you develop these relationships, then you have the ability to add the information. Then you have the ability to respond. So I remember doing this with somebody who was absolutely escalated, and I listened and listened and listened, and he was ranting on about this Iraqi woman who was a speaker at Terry Shrunk. This is years ago. And only after I listened long enough was I able to convince him that he was heard. And so it was my turn to just add one thing that he might not know. And I said, did you know that American drones killed her father? And so she's, she has her own issues that she's dealing with. And that helped to contextualize her to him, where he had no context before outside of she's an ungrateful foreigner. But I could not have led with that and expected anything other than him to escalate. So when it's done in that sequence, it can work very well. And I just want to say one more thing about any method of managing conflict. I mean, that's what I teach in the Department of Conflict Resolution. There's no guarantees. All you can do is try to increase your odds. There's a background success rate with nonviolence that is superior to violence. There's a background success rate of mediation that is actually superior to when a judge makes a ruling. The things on our side of the ledger have a better success rate, but we also have failures. So going out with the expectation of a guarantee is not realistic. We just all do our best in the moment with the tools that we've been able to develop.
Thank you, Tom. And those tools, if you're going out into the public, don't just have one idea on how to do things. Practice many ways, because there's lots of different things that might work. And if you haven't practiced them to see if they do work, you won't know. And as Patty brought up, and I'm sorry she's gone now, but as she brought up earlier, role play is the #1 best way to prepare yourself to be out in the field. It really is. And if you're practicing together, then scenarios might come up that you may not have ever thought about, and you'll be prepared for that. And that's the last thing.
I'm gonna break in just because we're at 8:30, and we can keep going for people that want to stay on, but if folks wanted to cut off, the other thing is two nights from tonight, 7:30 to 9, Rosie Betzall will be leading exactly what Adam was talking about, which is we'll be doing role playing. It'll be over Zoom, but it's sort of, we've heard some of the concepts. Now let's try it out and see how we can practice them. So it's in the chat, the link for that, but we'll get that out as well. And folks are welcome to hang out a little bit longer to ask and answer more questions. But if you want to leave,
Turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta turn, turn, we gotta the seas are rising, but the struggle is long. We're gonna turn history, turn it around. And the CEO's got money, but our union is strong. We're gonna move history, move it along. We're gonna turn history, turn it around. We're gonna turn history, turn it around. We're gonna turn history and turn it around.